everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here with my co-host Thomas D. Howes for another episode of the Reagan Caucus podcast. Our guest today is coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee, a great city. She is a writer, communication specialist, and political and cultural commentator who has worked in digital media for almost 20 years, including for presidential campaigns. You can find her written work at places like National Review, National Catholic Register, and her non-political Substack, Growing Olives in Nashville. I'm talking about Emily Zanotti. Emily, thanks for joining the two of us today on the Reagan Caucus podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's great to have you on. We wanted to ask you a bit about Israel and the war in Gaza, specifically about some of the big debates going on right now. You're familiar with the discourse and have been weighing in on it. There are, just in general, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and I think it's tough for the average observer to adequately grasp the situation in the Gaza Strip. It's been framed in various ways by people in the media, but there seems to be this steady narrative there that there is profound suffering in Gaza, tied to there not being enough food for the people. And
Mhm.
a lot of people are blaming Israel. Can you talk about that narrative, whether or not there's any fairness to it, any legitimacy to it, and which context and additional information that narrative may be lacking?
So I think that there's certainly a humanitarian crisis happening. I think that at this point you can kind of you know, go back and forth based on where you're getting your information, but there's certainly some issue with getting food to people. There's certainly some issue with getting supplies to people. This is a war that's now been going on for about 2 years in a very small piece of land. And so there's not a lot of room for people to go. They can't emigrate to Egypt. They can't emigrate elsewhere. There's nowhere for the Gazan people to go. So they're stuck in the middle of a war that unfortunately their own leadership started on October 7th, but that has now gone on for 2 years. So what had been, a mission to control Gaza, to oust Hamas, to return hostages that were taken on October 7th is now an extended operation. And anytime that you have these extended operations anywhere in the world, you certainly have humanitarian considerations. There are various reasons why humanitarian control and humanitarian aid can't get in there. One of them is it's being bombarded. It is a war zone. And that's certainly, you can argue whose fault it is, but it's certainly Israel's responsibility. There's also a difficulty getting food to people who need it and not washing it through Hamas, which is the controlling administration in that area. So you're trying to get food to people through an organization that actually funds its own operations by selling the aid. So they're getting food from the United Nations and they're trying to upcharge to their own citizens who are starving. They also consider anyone who's going to the United States or the United Nations to get aid around Hamas as a traitor to the cause. And so they're certainly not approaching this in a reasonable way, killing people who are trying to get aid. But it's one of those scenarios on a world stage where at this point, everybody is responsible and something terrible is happening. And that's where I think the news media kind of comes into play. You certainly have a lot of people who are just getting information straight from the Israeli government. You have people who are getting information straight from Hamas. It's very difficult to get on the ground there to see exactly what's happening. But I don't think it's wrong to say, look, there's a humanitarian crisis, and it's time to solve this in a way that makes sense on a global stage and preserves the lives of people who didn't ask for this to start.
I think I've seen some arguments out there, people, maybe not so arguments, questions about why the UN doesn't distribute aid itself. And I think you hit on it. It's these distribution sites, they're often attacked, including by Hamas. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there is a lot of The Israeli government has shown a lot in the last couple days drone footage of thousands and thousands of pounds of aid kind of rotting in a space. And the truth is that there's really not a lot of that they can do about that. The United Nations is having a difficult time going in because it is an active war zone. And you can go back a couple of weeks to the church that was accidentally bombed, where 3 people died. And that has been a massive center of aid for many people who really don't have a dog in this fight. They're Palestinian Christians who don't love Hamas. They don't particularly like Israel. They're kind of in the middle. They have this one place that they can go to get aid. And this aid has reached out to the disabled, it's reached out to children, and it gets bombed on accident. And so no matter what you do, you're kind of stuck because Gaza is so small that it's almost impossible to distribute this aid without facing some sort of violence somewhere along this line.
A complicated and unfortunate situation for sure. I wanted to bring Thomas into the conversation for some questions. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, and I guess this famine, this food crisis that they're having right now, has sort of brought people's attention to the war in general.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that Israel's, from the standpoint of since October 7th, Israel's operations in increasing its own security have been very successful from that standpoint. I mean, they've weakened Iran, they've weakened Hezbollah, and they've weakened Hamas. I mean, I think it's like 35 to 50% of Hamas's operatives have been wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, there is a sort of, I mean, in the United States, we don't have any skin in the game like they do in Israel. And there are a lot of voices saying that, you know, as bad as Hamas is, they just need to end this war. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about that argument?
I think Israel is in a tough place here too. I think you still have hostages in Gaza. There's still, at least in the last couple of days, indications that some of them are alive. In order to completely return them to Israeli soil, you're going to have to do a ground war that eliminates a lot, creates a lot of collateral damage to get 1 or 2 hostages back that might still be alive. But Israel has said that's what we want. We want the hostages back alive. The other option is to basically level the place, which I think Israel probably toys with pretty regularly. Especially, the critical eye toward Israel is that this is too much damage. This is too many lives lost. But really, it's one of the most surgical strikes in history in terms of military strikes. It's an incredible, if you think about it. But if you were to go and just level the place in return for October 7th, well, now you're 2 years out. So the timing is very weird. But also then you can kill your hostages and kill people in there and collateral damage like Palestinian Christians. So I think executing this war in such a small place is really difficult for them. And in addition, it's like Iran. People run out of interest really fast, right? So the United States goes in, they use the bunker busters, they come out, and then Donald Trump says, I'm done. Well, that's an arbitrary line too. If Iran is truly a threat to American security, then a strategic strike isn't necessarily the end of the war. The other side of that is, if it's not our business, then why were we there in the beginning? This is a really difficult kind of situation to parse out. And, to complicate that, we've been in the Middle East for 20 years. at this point, the prevailing impression of wars in the Middle East is that you're never going to get out of them. And so now at the 2-year mark, everyone's looking at Israel and going, is really a quagmire? Is this, can you not get rid of Hamas? Is there any end to this war in sight that doesn't involve Israel going in and taking control? And so it's just a difficult position for everyone involved. And the people who are really suffering for this are the people who are in that war zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that I've noticed is that I'm kind of split here because I mean I've seen the headlines. The media is obviously, the mainstream media is obviously very biased against Israel in this conflict. I mean, there's no real.
It's not subtle at all.
There's no attention to the fact how difficult their situation is. You know that they're fighting with these like sort of basically a death cult that uses the killing of innocent life for PR purposes. They just don't. They have their main desire is to hurt Israel. And when you're dealing with people that are that unreasonable and that evil, I mean, we're talking, these are like Nazi evil. The Hamas is very evil. It's a difficult position for Israel to be in. I mean, and I think it's good that people are pressuring Israel to follow norms of war and to be as precise as they can be and to be as attentive to the life of collateral damage or the life of innocent people as possible. That's probably a good thing. We need to keep that pressure on because it's true. There are people in the Israeli government. Some of them are very attentive to those same things, and some of them are not. And you want the ones that are attentive to those things to win out, and to have that extra argument there that, hey, this is going to be bad PR for her. This is going to be bad tactically too. It's not just the wrong thing to do; it's bad tactically. It sounds to me that the public statements of Netanyahu recently have been like that he said this isn't just the right thing to do, it's tactically right that we get aid to these people, and right, so the pressure is not the problem. I think that the pressure is probably a good thing. At the same time, the exaggeration and misinformation about what Israel's doing and the failure to recognize the difficult spot they're in. Would you say that, have you seen it used by people who just want to blame Israel? They just want to blame the Jews? Or
I think that that's another thing that ends up coming into play here, and that is anti-Semitism is a very old bias, right? It's a dangerous bias. It's been used to decimate the Jewish people time and time and time again. And you very rarely see people come along and say, well, we're not an ally of Israel because Israel pays us. We're an ally of Israel because it's this teeny little strip of land that manages to have a functioning democracy in what is a very explosive region of the world. And often our foreign policy in a third to a half of most of the global area centers around the Middle East and centers around how the Middle East operates and the governments of the Middle East, the money of the Middle East. This is a really complex region. And Israel becomes the only stable ally in an increasingly complex region. And even when we kind of look at Europe responds to some of this, they'll say, oh, well, we recognize a Palestinian state. Well, that's the first of many questions, right? What is a Palestinian state? Where is it? What does the leadership look like? What does the function look like? How is it approached on a world stage? How is it approached in a trade war? How is it approached in the United Nations? We don't have answers to any of that. So it's a nice thing to say, but it's really not functional on a foreign policy level. Um, and Israel gets heat for just being Israel, for just being existing in a state. We have had wars on borders for as long as humanity has existed. It's not new for anyone to want to conquer land. And certainly the people who are now saying they were a conquered people were conquering that land 100 and 200 years ago. So it's a modern, like, sort of misinformation campaign that takes on a problem that's old as time itself. And you end up having this PR war that happens in people who aren't really schooled on it, right? It's people on Instagram, people on Facebook, people with memes, people with like a bumper sticker level knowledge of what's going on. It's just like, famine is bad, so Israel must be bad. It just doesn't work that way, and the way that information travels now makes it just so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in with the question real quick? I had one that piggybacks off that. Well, you talked about the mainstream media. Emily, have you been surprised that notable media voices on the right, like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, that they've adopted such strong anti-Israel sentiment? We've seen this type of thing on the hard left for some time
Yeah.
now, but it feels relatively new outside of some very fringe voices on the political right.
I think it's been there simmering under the surface for a while. And now there's a lot of people with big names who make it acceptable in a way, which is devastating for the right? Like, we used to be the party of conscience. We were the party of approaches to complex issues, conservatism, Israel being an ally. We understood what democracy meant and why it had to be supported in the Middle East. And now it's just sort of conspiracy theory palooza, right? Like, and I think that is in part just a development of the social media atmosphere. When people are looking to support themselves in media, they just increasingly approach the lunatic fringe, because it's just, they run out of supporters in one space and they just keep going towards the fringe as their support dwindles out. But you also can't discount that there's money behind this too. Like, Qatar and Hamas is not poor by any respect, and certainly that has a lot to do with it. I think what's more surprising to me is that you have organizations like the New York Times and the Washington Post, who in previous iterations might have questioned things that they get, just like press releases from Hamas. And then now they're just like, let's print this with the photo attached.
Yeah.
That we just received from a terrorist organization. And you would think that a journalistic institution would be like, let's not ruin our credibility by posting terrorist propaganda. Just sort of hook, line, and sinker. So it's just a very weird landscape overall.
No, that's a real problem that you brought up just now. Just sort of, Hamas-controlled media basically being accepted in some American news outlets, and it's. I feel like there's been enough pushback on that over time from people on the right and others that they would kind of stop doing that. It doesn't seem like it's made a dent. That's odd. I'll throw it back to you, Thomas. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's good. Yeah, it's I have noticed too that there's a divide among, you see it on the left. What I'm seeing on the left, I don't, I'm not of the left, so but what I'm seeing from an outsider's perspective is a marginalization of the pro-Israel Democrats especially in the last few weeks, the last few months. It's accelerated. A bunch of pro-Israel Democrats that I had sort of followed online. It's like they all felt pressured to come down hard against Israel now, and to use the sort of unjustified, exaggerated language, like Israel is engaging in genocide, or Israel is um, you know, targeting innocent civilians and all these other things that, it's like you better have some proof if you're going to make these claims, and a lot of it's based off misinformation. Whenever I read these articles and I see them cite the Gaza health authorities, I'm like, okay, I can just skip this article. Yeah. So Hamas told us that this happened. But I have seen that, and I'm concerned about it. And also, you see in New York City, which is the media capital of the world, it looks like they're going to elect Mamdani as the mayor. And Mamdani has said some very unfortunate things related to Israel and the Jews. He used all the slogans of the
right.
Things like I don't know if he said from the river to the sea, but it said things like
globalize the Intifada. I don't. He never really said, like, he says he didn't say it, but it's in it's on record.
Yeah. And after October 7th, he condemned Israel first.
Right.
But this was all unfortunate, but then he starts blaming Israel. So it's very, I'm concerned. I don't know if there's going to be much space for the, sort of pro-Israel or liberals in the Democratic Party. I'm not sure. It doesn't look good over there. But then even on the Republican side, to his credit, Donald Trump has been very supportive of Israel. I guess I'm of the minority who supported the strike on the nuclear facility, because I actually think that it was a big problem and saved us a few months of nuclear holocaust, and that's good, and we should do it again. But I know that I'm in the
Is that a minority position on the right?
I think it's a minority position. I think a calculated strike on their nuclear facility should have been done a long time ago. That we waited this long is kind of terrifying to me, because we were just I think it's a minority position.
Yeah, I'm giving Trump all the credit for that. He did what needed to be done, but well, it depends how you poll it, right? If you ask, should we allow Iran to have nuclear weapons? Everyone's like, no.
Right.
That's like, anyway, but Trump's been pretty pro-Israel. I give him credit for that. He's been pretty pro-Israel, and he's actually, even when it's not popular with his base, he's been pretty good about that. But what I see is a divide between the younger people connected or adjacent to the Republican Party. I say adjacent to the Republican Party because there are a lot of conservatives out there that don't like to be called Republican right now. But what I'm seeing with but there's also a lot of Republicans that aren't conservative, so it's that's why I don't know what to well, the people on the right. There's a divide, I think, between people who are 40 and older tend to be pretty pro-Israel, and people who are younger than 40, they don't. I don't know if you've seen this, but I don't think they're very pro-Israel at all. In fact, I think that a lot of times they agree with their left-wing friends on Israel. What have you seen there?
I think that's exactly right. And I think that it's a minority position on Iran. I think what happened in that lead up was a lot of public relations that suggested that any strike on Iran would lead to a replay of the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And I think that was deliberate. I think people who are opposed to Israel really wanted to drive home this idea that if the United States gets involved, we're entering another situation where we're going to be 20 years in Afghanistan trying to clear out the Taliban.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that hits home with a lot of people who are, maybe 40, my age, maybe even just a little bit younger, because our friends were the ones that went and served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think that there's an anti-war sentiment from people our age and older millennials because of that. But there's also that nefarious sort of just treading right underneath the water is this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Jew, really, that's underlying it. And so those two messages get crossed. And I think that Gen Z and maybe younger are very anti-Israel. They have bitten a lot of this hook, line, and sinker. Like, they think it's agenda. All eyes are on Rafah. They don't see October 7th as a justification. They do rationalize it very much like Mondani did. They were not alive in the Second Intifada, so for them, it's just sort of this, it's a call to protest. It's a call to fight for the rights of the oppressed. And really what we lived through, the Second Intifada, was a very bloody, very deadly, awful sort of attack on Israel, on innocent people on buses and in cafes, and there was no end to what was done. There was no parameters to that war, and they don't quite understand. And certainly the people who are running Hamas and the radical Islamic factions in the Middle East know exactly what from the river to the sea means. And people sort of try to rationalize it and pawn it off. And it's kind of cool to join these parties. And who are you to oppose stopping a genocide? And I think just people are just very receptive to that kind of argument and don't quite realize what it means. Because if Israel's wiped out, there's nowhere for the Jews to go. There's no homeland. There's no democracy in the Middle East. There's no, and there's also so much more to this conflict than just Israel. Like certainly refugees from Hamas or refugees from Hamas in Gaza are not being allowed into Egypt, and there's a reason for that. They're not being allowed into Jordan, and there's a reason for that. There is a definite need to keep this conflict going because it hits at the core of Western sensibilities, and undermines trust in Israel. And I think it's unfortunately working.
John, do you want?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think social media, especially with the younger people, plays such a big role in all of this too. I think that there is this lack of historical knowledge from a lot of younger people when it comes to that broader conflict over the decades, and I think there's always sort of this inclination of younger people to kind of take a lot away, one, from what they see on social media, but they're sort of standing up for the underdog sort of feeling, and they even though Israel will be the real underdog, but the way it's presented in these videos, it's not. The people in Gaza are, and yeah, it's tough to break through that. I think we've seen how social media can influence people's views. I think older people too, in other areas, you kind of see how on the right, sectors of the right, you've seen this. You can say pro-Russia, but anti-Ukraine sentiment that kind of started up, maybe a few months into Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think a lot of that is just sort of social media driven. Do you think that's correct, Emily?
Yeah, I think it's part and parcel of just a larger degradation of media on the right. Like it's not just Israel where this is happening. It's everything from health and wellness, vaccines, QAnon, the Epstein files. Like this is going to be something maybe people will study for years to come, is how this sort of online culture just gradually lost its grip on reality, on the right. And what happened, right? So we went from sort of marginalizing QAnon type of ideas to mainlining them, to the point where now they become policy and politics, and it is its own behemoth. And the Israel-Gaza or Israel-Hamas conflict is just sort of one symptom of a much bigger problem with right-leaning media, just generally. Is like, when did everybody get so crazy? It's just and unable to moderate in any way. And it's just something that's secluded to young people. It seems to just go all the way up. And maybe it's not both sides. I just am sort of immersed in this particular media culture, but it's just social media has allowed people to just go nuts in ways that they haven't been able to before. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny because it does have that impact on global conflict. And, 2 years into this conflict in Gaza, it is having an impact. And anti-Semitism rages like wildfire because people want somebody to blame. It's why it's always raged like wildfire. They're a really easy group to blame. They're very successful. They're often there to do the jobs people in countries don't want to do. There's plenty of reasons, and none of them really rational, but plenty of reasons why Jews have always been the scapegoat here. And it's just sort of happening again. And it's part and parcel of this like really crazy developments on the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's definitely I think there is a generational element to it. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, grew up in the '80s. I think people from my vantage point maybe didn't learn a lot about the history of Israel in history books, but it never even occurred. And I grew up in Colorado. It's probably different in different parts of the United States, but it didn't even occur to me why anybody would inherently blame Jews for for anything. This is more than any other group of people, and yeah, I think the further we get away from the history of Israel and the understanding of what it's been through and how it was formed, I think it's even sort of left it open to this demagoguery and false messaging or oversimplified messaging that we see all the time on social media. It's wild. Again, this isn't just younger people, but I have friends on social media, Facebook, people I actually know in real life who, when it comes to being online, they seem to communicate almost exclusively in political memes, stuff that they share from other place, not really knowing if there's any legitimacy to it. They just kind of throw it out there, and yeah, it feels like such an unhealthy thing.
It's so strange, and it's you do also see the rewriting of history in real time, which is very strange. When we talk about people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they're not just attacking the Jewish people about Israel. They're going back and trying to relitigate World War II, which is bizarre because World War II is in living memory. It's not like we're in some, it's not like we're relitigating something that everybody who participated in it is dead. They're trying to relitigate something that's in living memory. And it seems like a very, like, I don't know if it's just money making or what is it, but it just seems very much like we're not learning these things in school, so we're going to go online and learn it from people who have no expertise in it. And maybe that's, the function of the internet. None of us are really experts in anything anymore. But yeah, it does seem like the function of social media and the microphone that everybody has and the platforms that everybody has really taken a hit on how we process information and how we process global conflict. Like, we see it in memes, we see it in photos, we see it in the way that we communicate, which is in ADHD, nothing more than 20 seconds. So it's all tied up in there. And my cat.
I think you're right. Thomas, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, well, yeah, just observation that the Tucker Carlson, for me, I never liked Tucker Carlson. I always thought he was kind of a grifter, but he's gotten worse throughout the years. And I thought it's just been, just as I'm shocked by the sort of Gen Z and what they learn from TikTok. So many older people who I used to think were smart. I thought that they'd be off the Tucker Carlson train when he interviewed Putin that one time, and then went to the grocery stores. But
the bread smelled so good though, Thomas. That was smelling bread.
You have to put a quarter in for your cart.
Yeah. Yeah, but apparently they still watch him, and that's dark to me. That given the things that he has, anti-Hitler fake historians on his show and all that. But
And I
So
think his
that's
podcast is still like one of the top rated. So he's definitely there's viewership there. There's people, there's money being made there. Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
wild to learn
yeah.
that the other day.
I expected more from people, I guess, but
Maybe
yeah. So
that's our problem. Maybe we're just coming of age. Like Gen X knew this all along and they were like, everyone's an idiot. And then us older millennials are now like hitting 40 and we're like, oh my God, they were right. Like maybe we shouldn't have trusted anyone like this. I don't know. Maybe we're all just discovering something that we should have known all along, but it
yeah,
does feel like, being in this business for 20 years and working on campaigns with McCain and Romney and there does seem to be very different landscape now, and maybe it's the Jon Stewartification of politics.
hmm
Um, when I was in college and a little bit later, Jon Stewart was just hilarious, and we all wanted to be like him, and we were all very cynical about all of this, and turned it into an entertainment format. And then we got what we wanted, which was politics as entertainment, and now we have buyer's remorse. Like this is a mess. Like,
no,
Yeah,
I
I think that's a good point with the entertainment part. That really has screwed up a lot of our political discourse for sure.
now I wonder, JD Vance, Trump kind of surprises you because he's like some people I've heard him described as a random number generator. So it's like, oh, okay. So we got a 4 today. Oh, 4 is good. That's good. Oh, we got 7 today. That's not so good. But it's like you'd almost prefer the random number generator to like the consistently bad, you know.
right.
And I'm worried that if something big doesn't happen culturally to stop the sort of JD Vance taking over the Republican Party, that we will start getting consistent. We're going to go from random number generator to consistently bad.
Yeah.
JD Vance is closely connected with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson was the guy who tried to get him nominated.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if JD Vance is in charge, is is he supportive of Israel at all?
It's a good question. I don't know what JD Vance supports. I wish I
Mhm.
did.
Yeah.
Um, he seems like a magic 8 ball, and every day it changes a little bit, and whatever the environment is. And it's been that way for 20 years, right? Like he's ever since he came out as anti-Trump, vehemently anti-Trump,
Mhm.
and then ends up as his vice president. And I think it's disarming too. He's got a very cute family, very young family. I think there's a lot of Camelot quality to that, which hits people right here. They want a statesman. They want somebody who's got young kids.
Mhm.
Um, but he is really difficult to pin down on what he believes, and you can't really always be sure that he believes what he says. So that is a little bit worrying going into this next cycle. Or Donald Trump isn't a spring chicken.
Mhm.
We talked a lot about uh, how Biden was kind of falling off the wagon there at the end, but Donald Trump is the same age. The guy wants to retire and go back to his house in Florida and golf for the rest of his life. He doesn't want to be doing this forever. Um, and so it's possible that the road to the presidency isn't necessarily through the ballot box for JD Vance. So it is a little bit, it's daunting. It's daunting from a perspective of someone who's been in the business for 20 years and has seen the Republican Party at a bunch of different iterations
Mhm.
and did not see this coming, which I think a lot of people are like, oh, we all saw this coming years ago. I don't know. 2016 kind of came out of nowhere. Um, and it's an unsettling time. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Just to jump in a little bit with the Vance stuff, because he has in most of his statements been supportive of Israel, but a lot of the arguments he's used about how we shouldn't support Ukraine, for example, um, they seem like they almost come from ideology when he speaks about them. But it seems like they could just as easily be applied. Like why just Ukraine? I could see him
Yeah.
switching on a dime and using those same arguments against Israel, because there really is this I don't understand it at all. To me, it's perfectly consistent to support both Ukraine and Israel on these plights. But you have, and this happens on both sides. People kind of pick and choose. Well, this I can support this one, but not the other one. That doesn't make much sense to me. So yeah, I could see Vance pretty easily shifting when the political tides, what he thinks the political environment will allow for it.
Yeah, I mean, I do know some people that know Vance, and I know some people that are friends with Vance, and I think he's a little more radical than people realize in his own thinking. He had a conversion a few years ago, and was kind of brought in by people who are a little bit more radical to the Catholic Church. He's sort of a more radical people within it. Um, and he definitely does seem like a radicalizing force within the administration, where Rubio is more of a traditional Republican and Vance is normally the worm tongue and for Trump to do the more new right kind of thing. Um, but um, but I think you're right. I mean, I think you're right insofar as that I do think power is the most important thing to him. So he'll change his positions rather quickly if he thinks that that's going to get him more power. So,
And I think he wants to be a Cinderella story. I
hmm
think he wants to go from the trailer park to the White House,
hmm
and he will not stop until he's done that. And whatever it takes to get there is on the table. And that's why I think he's really hard to pin down. Is like I don't know that he's super red. I know people who know him too from Catholic circles, and they do run in the same circles as like Harrison Butker and a lot of them. And then there's this other sort of circle that's the Candace Owens and the Steve Bannons, and he's not there yet.
hmm
But is it possible that if those people start to wield power, that changes? So it is very much like I'm going to follow power where it goes. Um, and tomorrow's sentiment could change on Israel. That's one of the problems of social media, right? If Hamas goes in a different direction, it's possible sentiment could change on Israel, and he could change. I don't think it's probable, and I do see some of the same arguments, like you said, John, being made about Ukraine. Now it's 2 or 3 years down the road. Just give it up, sue for peace. We have somebody in the director's chair here that not everybody really likes, whether that's Zelensky or Netanyahu. They're a little more extreme than their elected government. So you see all the same arguments being set up for Israel, and that's really, it's nefarious. And I don't doubt that he's part of that process on the administration side.
Yeah, I think those are some good points. I know you're a little bit on a tight schedule, Emily. So do you care if I jump to the last question, Thomas, or did you have one
Sure,
more
go
you
for
wanted? Okay, I wanted to actually go in a completely different direction for this last question. I mentioned at the top that you write a Substack called Growing Olives in Nashville. It's entirely non-political, and it focuses on what I would describe as your very unique and interesting domestic life in Nashville. I feel that there's a lot of activity going on all the time.
There it
Can you tell
is. I live in chaos.
Oh, yeah, can you tell me what that's about? What life is like for your family out there, and what it is you write about on the Growing Olives in Nashville Substack?
So a couple years ago, we moved out here to Nashville. We got out of Chicago after I was brought here on a job, but we were trying to get out of Chicago after COVID because Chicago really locked down. So we were one of the migrants that came to the red states after COVID. Now we live in the city of Nashville proper, and we have a mini farm. I don't know if you could hear it before, but there was a chicken screaming outside my window. Um, this is not unusual. I have three small children. We have a mini farm. I'm not sure how many chickens now. Chickens just seem to multiply all the time. And yeah, the Substack is really just about, life among the savages here in Nashville.
Do you feel like that's a good escape? Because I know people like the three of us very politically in tune, but I write fiction novels. This is a separate world that I'm in, and I feel like I almost sort of need that escape to sort of balance out life a little more. Is that how you sort of look at that type of writing that you do for your Substack?
I feel like everybody that I've been friends with or like in some way interacted with on this road in politics is always desperate to get out, and then they get a taste of what it's like to be on the outside and they're like, no, I need to run back. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's somewhere to go and something to do that isn't politics. And I've tried to move a little bit more towards this and teaching people how to cook and doing little nature camps at my kids' school and stuff like that. And it's just a really nice break. And it's also a way to see that the world moves forward no matter what happens in DC. And I think a lot of people forget that, is that there is a life that gets lived by 30 million people or 300 million people every day in this country that are not in power. And so it's just nice to know that there's life that goes on, even as, we're arguing over warplanes over Israel. it's just a good thing to know that you're raising another generation.
Exactly. I think compartmentalization is a healthy thing in someone's life. Well, Emily, I want to thank you so much for coming on today's Reagan Caucus podcast. You provided some helpful insight on a very, like we said, complex topic, and we very much appreciate it. I think listeners will as well.
Thanks. Thank you for having me and my cat.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was saying at the front, we're a pet-friendly podcast here on the Reagan Caucus. So, everyone else, for those who are watching us or listening to us today, if you're on YouTube seeing us, as always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or some other audio platform, please like and subscribe. And we will see you next time on the Reagan Caucus podcast.